That's really the only thing that's different. If gravel bikes and XC bikes had the same spacing, like, I think the sector would just merge. In this episode, we're going to look at Leadville 100 mountain bike race. Is it a mountain bike race? Is it a gravel race? Traditionally, it's always been a mountain bike race, but the crossovers being on the Lifetime Grand Prix circuit. And the tech in this race is really interesting because we've gone full circle now back to 1990s mountain bikes with drop bars. And will gravel bikes see more suspension? Will road bikes end up getting more suspension? Well, mark my words, I'm going to say it now. Suspension is coming to road bikes. And I think this is such a pioneering race. If there's one race in North America that I'd really like to go to, it would be this one. Forget Unbound, that's boring. This is where it's at in terms of optimization, tech, and aero savings. Now, we're going to get into how many watts were saved with drop bars, how many watts were saved with fork fairings. And yes, it's all kind of back of the envelope calcs, but I tried to be as critical and as accurate as possible using two different models, kind of a segment-based model which takes in all the climbs, all the descents, and a more of an average speed model, which is like the crude way of doing it. And I think I pretty much got quite close, having spoke to some people in the know about the assumptions. Anyway, we'll come to that. And then in the second segment on this podcast, so ludicrous, depressing, and downright dangerous, we're calling this segment Denial by Default. If the bike companies could reject your warranty claim at checkout, they certainly would. You are guilty until proven innocent, and admission of fault is rarer than rocking horse shit, and will come some absolute bangers. So I put a call out to my Instagram followers, and the stories that came in were absolutely hilarious and quite depressing about basically the bike industry gaslighting customers that, you know, the handlebar that snapped was your fault, or the fork that snapped was your fault somehow, or you've definitely overtalked it, or you've clamped it in a bike stand when actually you don't own a bike stand. There were too many to put in. If I didn't mention yours here, obviously there were just too many for the segment, but maybe we'll put them in future PT shows. We have to be very careful. There's obviously user error involved. So I tried to vet these as closely as I can, and I've asked for proof as well. So I think we've got these pretty accurate, but it's no replacement for, you know, good practice. Going back to the Leadville 100. So the Leadville 100 is a mountain bike race traditionally, but the speeds are pretty damn high. It can be ridden on hardtails. It can be ridden on, some say, gravel bikes with XC tires. And it's a really interesting optimization problem because it's super hilly. It's up at 3,000 meters above sea level, 10,000 feet above sea level. So ironically, the aero claims we're going to discuss in this video don't actually apply to their full juicy effect because you're only at kind of 90% air density, and I think 6% less oxygen for the riders at that altitude. So seriously impressive. But the tech and the optimization problems in this race are really interesting. And I've actually gone through a segment-based model and a more crude model and tried to interpolate between the two to actually find out the wattage savings. So by using drop bars, we saw a lot of riders on drop bars, about 50-50 in the top 10 by drop bars and flat bars. Obviously, certain riders are more comfortable on flat bars. Some riders have been practicing on drop bars, practicing the descents, practicing the climb, practicing power line. Is it effective to use drop bars? Has anyone got the numbers? Well, I've tried to put some numbers and done a bit of a simulation to figure it out. So let's dive into it. Now, obviously, there are loads of assumptions we have to make here, like the rider is not always standing up on the descents in the drops, on the drop bars, or on the flat bars. That's going to throw the CDAs off. Other assumptions about rolling resistance. So I've just used XC tires on dirt, like a fast XC tire on dirt. Now, the top 10 is completely covered by all different tires. Some are on Specialized, some are on Aspens, and you can't actually get accurate rolling resistance data for the Maxxis Aspens because Keegan Swenson is using like a team-only version, some of them on Schwalbe tires. So it is quite hard to approximate things like rolling resistance, but we've used, I think, a fair assumption for that. And I'll put all the assumptions on screen. I'm not going to mention them now. I can't list them out. There's too many. Air density is obviously 0.9, like I said, 9%, because you're up at 3,000 meters above sea level. And then in the segment-based model, we've basically, I've approximated like the aero power. So the total power that the rider's putting out, the total energy exertion the rider's putting out in the segment-based model. It's a very hard thing to simulate. It's not like a flat TT or a flat road race where, you know, your aero power is much, much higher and it's happening all the time. So when I'm calling the baseline scenario just basically a normal XC bike, so round forks, and I'm talking about, they're all using telescopic suspension forks, either Fox or RockShox SIDS. I think they're 32mm stanchions, and the lowers are approximately 40mm. The lower of the forks, the cylindrical tubes, which are terrible for aerodynamics, and we'll come on to that. And flat bars, that's the baseline, so kind of traditional full suspension XC bike. Now, approximate, well, again, this is going to be different for every rider. You've got some really, really tall riders. You've got some really, really short riders and some stocky riders. But let's just keep the baseline simple. As the CDA of that is 0.3. So that is complete baseline. Now, we saw Keegan Swenson, I think, is the only rider in the top 10. Obviously, the guy that won the race, spoiler alert, was using faired forks. And I mentioned this in my ideal Paris-Roubaix video a couple of years ago and said, well, why don't off-road forks or fast gravel forks have faired lowers? And I actually proposed like the ideal gravel or Paris-Roubaix bike would have a lefty fork. So you're reducing the CDA of the fork by a factor of 2 or halving the CDA of the fork, and a faired lower. Now, as far as I know, no one's going to be making aerofoil shaped stanchions, and the stanchion is the bit that slides inside that lower, because no one makes aerofoil shaped shock bushings or fork bushings. It's just not going to happen. But you can fair the lower. I've always thought, why don't they do that? I mean, even in downhill, some of the downhill UCI downhill races, the riders are averaging over 50k an hour on a 3 or 4 minute track. That would be really effective to fair the lowers on those big, Fox 40s, where the lowers are more like 50 mil. And 2 50mm cylinders going down to the wheel, each one's about 35 centimeters long, is particularly bad for aerodynamics. And it's in the free stream as well, so it's really bad. So fork fairings, I'm surprised I haven't come along sooner. But if you look at the RockShox one here in these pictures on Keegan's bike, it's a pretty crude. I basically think it's been 3D printed and sort of like grafted onto the back of the lower. So it's not a true aerofoil. It basically just looks like a triangle or kind of stretched prism that's been glued on or sort of fillered on or smoothed over. So it's not a very good coefficient of drag. So a coefficient of drag of a really good aerofoil would be something like 0.05. So I've approximated this CD, the coefficient of drag for the aerofoil, as 0.15. Now the baseline case that this is comparing against is 240mm tubes, cylinders. Now, cylinders are really, really bad in free stream flow. The vortices off the back of the cylinders is very, very bad. It's just like your arm. That's just why we wear like Aero socks and stuff like that, Aero sleeves. But the fork lowers, they're right out there in the wind. They're quite fat, 2 tubes, 35 centimeters long each. And the approximate CDA, the reduction that's going to get you, I've approximated to about 0.026 meters squared in CDA. So the CDA for that fork fairing with flat bars, which I don't think anyone rode because Keegan was on round bars, you can start to see the CDAs reducing in this column here. So, and then we've got the case of basically drop bars. Now, just for ease of simulation, because there's so many different, you could break this down to so many different kind of segments where the riders are like on the hoods, on the tops, or in the drops when they're descending. But to keep it simple, I've kept the riders in their kind of aero hoods position, which should kind of get back the gains when they're on the downhill, when they're in the drops, versus when they're climbing bolt upright. So it's kind of a hoods position full time, I've said, throughout the race, because obviously they're not going to be full time on the hoods, but it's a good approximation. Otherwise, you could just go simulating forever with this. And you can see all these wattage savings in the column next to it, which are approximate again. And these wattage savings, if you looked at this in terms of a kind of steady state ride with a set amount of climbing at a set average speed, would be way higher. So that's why you can't really use that crude model. You have to break it down into climbs, descents, and flats, which is what this model shows. And then there's kind of a combined saving. So Keegan Swenson was riding drop bars. I've got another table here to show you who was riding drop bars and who was riding flat bars. I've gone through kind of all the race footage and the riders' Instagrams and their sponsor stuff to figure out their config for the race. So Keegan, let's look at the leader for a sec, was on drop bars and had the Aero forks. So this is that combined case here. So combined, which is hoods, full-time, and fork fairing. That is quite a significant CDA reduction. So basically it's these two CDA reductions put together to give you a new CDA of 0.23 versus the baseline of 0.3, which is on the traditional XC bike setup. And at this kind of speed, or these segment speeds, the wattage saving to keep the same time for the whole course was 20 watts. And that's super significant. And the total time that I predict that will that save, we can see the component time saving. So for the fork fairing, you've got 2.6 minutes, which is more than I thought it would be, I have to say. But then when you remember how big those cylinders are on the fork lowers and how long the race is, 2.6 minutes is a fair chunk. And in the hoods position, or just basically I call it the hoods position, but riding on the drop bar versus the flat bar, approximated to about 4 minutes. Now, I've since spoken to Dylan about this, and I didn't know he'd done this before the race, and he obviously had, but he reckoned it was worth 6 minutes. On Keegan's ride, because he's going slightly faster, 4 minutes. This is all based off Keegan's data, so as a baseline. So I think that's not too far out, to be fair. And there's about plus or minus 1 minute in my model. Plus or minus 1 minute in terms of accuracy, I think. 3.8 minutes for the drop bar case and 2.6 minutes for the fully fed fork case, which I think he was the only rider in the top 10 using. Now, there's two more lines in this ride, and this is super geeky. But we've got a better fork fairing. So like I said, those fork fairings look kind of crude. They look like triangles kind of grafted onto the back of a circle. If it was to be a properly designed aerofoil shape, so a nice aerofoil, maybe with a much lower CD, you still got the ends that you can't really graft on very well because you've got the cross brace on the lowers, and then where the through axle goes in, it's going to mess up the flow a bit. But if you had a much nicer aerofoil down at something like 0.08, you can see the wattage gain goes up to 13 watts from about 8 watts. So there is room for improvement on those aero fairings for sure. And then the individual gains for having that combined with the drop bars go up even more. But again, this is full of assumptions, but I've gone over this and gone over it, and I think this is about right. So if you're a rider in the top 10 and you didn't have that setup, a drop bar and fed fork. I mean, drop bar is the main gain here. The fed fork is a juicier gain than I thought it would be. But like I said, not all these gains are as juicy as they could be, because the air density in this simulation was 0.9. So even if this race was at sea level, it would be even higher, even more important for these aero gains. Now, there's lots of other caveats, like, yes, some riders can't descend on drop bars. They're just not comfortable with it. They have to use a flat bar. That's fine. Maybe they will go slower on the descents if they're on a drop bar because, you know, they're braking more and they're a bit more sketchy. So this is just what the math says. It's every rider is going to have a different response to this. So you can say what you like about it, put it in the comments down below. But like I said, so here's the top 10 and here's the gaps to the winner. So obviously Keegan Swenson, doesn't matter what he uses, he'll probably turn up on a fucking penny farthing and you still win. He's just the best. He's basically like the Tadej Focaccia of mountain biking, or XC mountain biking. It's just ridiculous. So yeah, the 15-minute gap to number 2, ridiculous. But you can see here that John Gaston was on a flat bar and the round handlebars. So the simulation, my simulation, says he could save 6 minutes, which is the compound difference on his original time, which would actually bring him a lot closer, about 9 minutes off Keegan Swenson's finishing time. So Keegan Swenson here, obviously in this table where you've got gap to winner, his time doesn't change because he is on the preferred setup of drop bar and fed fork. If you apply those savings to John Gaston, he moves up by 6.5 minutes. Simon Pello moves up by 2.5 minutes. The top 3 doesn't change, but then if you look from 4th to kind of 8th, you get a huge jumping of all the order. So like a big winner here is Chad Hager, like 6.5 minutes gained, picks up 2 places. Torbjorn goes, he's a Trek rider, I think. He drops 2.5 minutes because he was on a good setup anyway, and the other riders below him won. Who else picks up a couple of places? Taylor Ledeen picks up 2 places. Payson McKelvin picks up a place. And this is just all based on these time savings. And yes, the tactics of the race and the drafting and, you know, what would happen if the rider order was different coming into the finish. Of course, that will affect everything. So this is just a black and white. It won't happen like that in real time, but I just wanted to show you, like, these are huge time savings that could be had by optimizing this equipment. Very, very distinct time gaps. It wouldn't affect the top 3 so much, but would have made 1 and 2 very much closer, and a big reshuffle in the mid-pack. So I just thought that was an interesting study. It took quite a long time to break down all the segments, specifically the climbs, and what the segment model doesn't actually do is take into account the actually technicalities of the climbs, and like the routes, the rocks and stuff. Like, they just take into account the duration of the climbs and the gradients. And I certainly think what the ramifications of this are going to be. Well, I think having a suspension fork on a gravel bike, I think it's going to be normal. I think that, you know, our current gravel bikes are going to morph into these XC bikes. They are just going to. And the only reason that they're not is basically the front and rear wheel spacing. They're at different standards. So on a mountain bike, you've got 110mm front axle width and 148 at the back if it's boost. On road, you've got 142 at the back. But I think Keegan Swenson's actually riding gravel rims built onto a mountain bike hub just to get the spacing. And it's that really the only thing that's different. If gravel bikes and XC bikes have the same spacing, like, I think the sector would just merge, and I think the bike industry is laughing at us because it's come back to the early 1990s, and we're still buying 2 categories of bikes when actually we could probably just have 1 in the garage. But yeah, anyway, I hope you enjoyed that little bit on the aerodynamics of Leadville. It's, like I said, it's certainly not as black and white as this, but if you make it black and white, these are the kind of savings you could be making. And like, yeah, Chad, if you want to get good at riding on drop bars, you could save a fair amount of time. So back to the segment. This is slightly more less serious segment. It's a bit of fun, but it is quite
depressing. Like I said, this is denial by default.
If the bike industry could reject your warranty claim, but check out they would. So I put a big call out to Instagram followers. Have you been gaslit by the bike industry? Are they trying to prove that it was your fault that the bike failed? So I'll start off with a good one here because this is quite hilarious. So this is actually one of my best mates who I ride with, mountain biker. And we're going to make this cryptic. So it's called the Cryptic Warranty BS game. Not very catchy, but I will change the name of the brand and you've got to think what it could be. We'll start with a very, very difficult one. So this is a Ravine Torque mountain e-bike, my friend's bike. So, very first ride down at the Forest of Dean. Very good place to ride in the UK.
This doesn't look right. I think there's a fucking crack in it, John. Look at that. Isn't that one of the motor mounts? I'm pretty sure it's not supposed to look like that. And that would explain why I heard this sort of crack sound between the compressions of these humps. Can't believe it. I'm honestly gutted, mate. It was like feeling unreal. I'm going to have to get onto Canyon, I reckon. Literally, first run on a fucking family trail on their heaviest hitting e-bike, and I've cracked it.
Developed a crack by the motor mount bolt on the very first ride. Got in touch with the brand, as you would, straight away, kind of like, what, WTF? And I'll put some footage here. Was told it was due to the incorrect style of riding. So this is a mountain bike being ridden at Forest of Dean, which is a mountain biking hub. They denied admission of fault, but they would honour the warranty. And this is classic gaslighting. It's like, it's not our fault, but we're hinting it's your fault. Because we're so good and gracious, we'll give you a new frame anyway. So they went through with that. They did get him a new frame. It took quite a few months to get the new frame. No compo given whilst he was out on the bike, without a bike. And because he's so fat and lazy, he can't ride a real bike. He has to have an e-bike. The second one failed in exactly the same place. Same bolt on the motor mount. And he finally got his money back after a lot of toing and froing. I think it was proof then that it wasn't due to his style of riding. The second one failed in exactly the same place. Finally got his money back and will avoid that brand forevermore. So that's just a classic one, okay? And what I would say is if you're facing this kind of BS, as soon as you buy a new bike, join the owners group on Facebook, because then you've got precedent. Because if you went to look on the Facebook group for this bike, the Ravine Torque, you would see that this failure is pretty common. So if you can send to the brand, and you have to do this because they think you're guilty before you can send them the photos, you have to send them like a court pack of evidence to prove that you're not guilty. And if you can send the precedents of all the photos on the Facebook group, people who had the same thing go wrong, then you've got a bit more clout behind you. So moving on to the next one. Now, this one I don't have any pictures for, but this is from a guy who works in a pube dealer. He says, one I can remember was a claim about a bottle cage mount that came loose in a frame, in the carbon frame. It got rejected straight away with the explanation, one should only use 450 milliliter bottles on the bike, ideally the ones that Cube supply and not other brands. As if the bike knows what brand of bottle is in the bottle cage. Ridiculous. Also, another story about a cracked seat post. This is the same guy. Once again, it was claimed one should only use the saddle that was supplied by Cube. How can the seat post, where it comes out of the frame, know what brand of saddle was on it? Absolutely ridiculous. That's the kind of like bullshit response where they simply think that physics and just logic doesn't apply. Anyway, this is another crapper one. This one's got pictures. Diddly, and I've vetted this one, and there's, like I said in the intro, there's no excuse for like user error or bad practice. So I'm trying to vet all these cases as best I can, but everyone has sent me these with like documentation and pictures and the full kind of transcript, and they've all had their issues resolved now, or some of them haven't. But I do. There were a couple that came in where I think no, you just overtimed it or something like this. But this is a cracker. Listen to this. This is the Diddly Woa Fast road bike. So under hard braking, the back of the forks would connect with the down tube cutout and lock up the steering. Sounds pretty dangerous. The bike shop went back and forth for 6 months until I went to them, showed them by putting a piece of paper behind the fork and asking them to pull on it once I had compressed on the handlebars. Obviously, the piece of paper wouldn't come out, so the gap was closing up. Originally, they didn't believe me and said it was an assembly error until I proved this to them. The top bearing interface wasn't concentric and they didn't have any more stock. And that was it. Never got resolved. So I don't know what happened to that bike, but yeah, just a denial of all fault by the brand. Yeah, the back of that fork has been rubbing on the down tube. I would say what's happened there is probably the bottom bearing seat's been molded too high up into the frame, so the fork's too close for frame. But that's absolutely criminal. Here's another one, which is quite close to my heart because I've repaired, I think I'm on my 4th or 5th giant seat post repair now. I've had my own giant seat post rejected twice by the warranty department. Okay, so this came in from a guy on Instagram. Seat post snapped. Giant said that my seat post clamp, was not original on the TCR. I sent them a video showing the part and the part number, and they stopped responding and declined the case with no explanation. They won't warranty the bike at all due to having modified the bike from original. Those modifications were a change of wheels and group set. Absolutely ridiculous. How is that going to affect the seat post? And they claim that the seat post clamp was an aftermarket one, even though I told them that you can't buy aftermarket ones because this is a proprietary part. They ignored me ever since. So actually, when I started fixing the giant seat post and talking about that issue, this guy got in touch with me and gave me this case, and that was a while ago. So he's no longer got the bike because he just can't get anywhere with it. Oh yeah, sorry, I was supposed to obscure the brand from that one, so let's call it a huge TCR. Next one, obscuring the brand again. This is cryptic. This is like a game for you, interactive game for you to play at home. So I had a Tractor road frame where the top tube cracked. Tractor claimed that I clamped the bike in a bike stand, and I don't even own a bike stand. And here are the pictures of the crack. He then went on to say that the guy analysing the warranty case could be like the guy analysing blood spatters at a crime scene, and he could say that how the bike broke without seeing it. And he was that carbon guy of the crime scene. Absolutely ridiculous. Like, what an arsehole. It is another quite serious one. The chainring sheared off a 50 tooth and became a 45 tooth. Was told it was my riding style unused error. Never got replaced by Shimano. Another one from Pube. Pube seems to be cropping up quite a lot in this list, even though I own a Pube and there's been nothing wrong with it. So the Pube steerer cracked on my new bike. They denied warranty because I'd used an aftermarket stem. So I'd use a zip stem on a round steerer, and apparently that's not allowed. Not too sure about that one, but I'll drop in some pics of that. Is another one. I had a brand new handbag Ono group set leaking oil. Handbag Ono said there was no leak, just fine. Sending them the brakes, the leaky leaders, in a bag which was then soaked in oil. Oh, that's fucking brilliant. Okay. Shrek/AL Enduro bike. So my top tube buckled on my Shrek/. I was told by warranty that I'd crashed it. Oh, this is what I love. I love it when they tell you that you crashed it, considering that the bike is full of sensors and cameras. So I complained to the brand's head office, and they called the manager at the bike shop I work at and tried to get me fired. I never got the bike warranted. Ridiculous. Even he was a dealer. Ridiculous. And here comes one from another dealer. Second ride on my new Shot Spark XC bike. The front carbon rim exploded. They would not warranty it, as they said, I quote, "It's normally only the rear rim that breaks, so I must have crashed it." Very frustrating to be in a shop trying to sell a brand product I don't believe in. Why would they want to dick me over on a brand new rim? Finally, they asked for the whole wheel back for inspection, which I sent them. They sent me a rim in return, but forgot to give me back all my spokes and the hub. What a time. I'll put in some pictures of that one. That's cracking. So they don't only do it to you and me, like the public. They do it to their dealers as well, which is fucking horrific. Right, here's another one. Shrek steerer failure. Did not warranty because I used a Synthase rather than a Bontrager stem. Now this one, I don't know. I'm not familiar with this Trek. I'm not sure what frames this is. Is it Crockett? Can't remember. Maybe you have to use a Bontrager stem. Not so sure undecided on that one. And there's just a couple of other random ones. Okay, so this is not a bike, but wasn't a bike, but an Oku dealer did say to me about my cracked sunglasses frame. Did you leave them in the sun too long? They've cracked because of excess UV damage. Interesting, I did have a few other messages from guys in Southeast Asia, and I could vouch for this because I've lived in Hong Kong for a while. Basically to say that warranting anything there is impossible. It's just straight up no, or basically a blanket refusal, even with Shimano. It just seems like statutory rights basically just don't exist down there. And I can vouch for that. I tried to warranty Shimano stuff and Giant stuff when I was living in Asia, and it's just impossible. But you're just going to waste your time arguing. So yeah, it sucks, but that's how it is. You know who you are for sending this in and making me alert to this. So this is about Caliber. So Caliber Boss Nut is a mountain bike, a very, very good value mountain bike sold by a big outdoor chain in the UK called Go Outdoors. Their Instagram and all their marketing material is showing this bike being backflipped, whipped, hucked about, jumped. Pretty much every single picture of this bike is in the air. The warranty wording for the bike on the website says the warranty does not cover jumps or wheelies. So if you crack your frame, are they just going to say, well, you did a wheelie in the car park or you jumped off a curb? Anyway, that was denial by default. We'll put some more in the next PT show. I hope you enjoyed that. If you've got any more hilarious ones that you can back up with proof, send them in down below or get in touch with me and we'll put them in the next one. But this is, like I said, is not an excuse to rant about your malpractice or how stick you are with your tools. You've got to be serious about this. But yeah, brands, let's just, nothing says dog shit brand like just denying everything. You're not going to get respect. This is just blanket denial and it makes you look like a fucking grifter and a liar. Get it right. Just own it. You'll keep the customer. If you fuck them around like the first one, he'll never buy a Canyon ever again. So like, stop fucking people around. Stop treating all your customers like fucking idiots. All right. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you enjoyed the Leadville bit at the start. If you've got any more questions or emails, whatever, put them down below. Don't forget, all these shows and more go on Patreon. There's more of these shows on Patreon. Follow me on Instagram for more of my kind of day-to-day musings and rants. And I'll see you in the next one.